Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Joint Transportation Board. Have a busy agenda tonight, and not only that, but we don't have one chair, but two chairs for your delight this evening, courtesy of school half term. So after item 8, I shall be departing, being replaced by Alex Ricketts as my trusty vice chair, taking over as full chair for the second half. And I'm sure you can all agree that no child should have to listen to item 9 on road closure updating. So thank you for your forbearance this evening. So on to the formal matter, formal matters to kick off with. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you, to my left, and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster a cape d'esame. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and filmed, and I would like to remind everyone that it will be made available to view in live and archive from the council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image and you are deemed to be consenting to being filmed and your image and sound recordings webcast. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall via the side exit behind the glass door. Firstly then, apologies for absence. Who do we have?
We have apologies from Mr Brady, Mr Marsh, Councillor Bland and Mr Atkinson.
Thank you. Any substitutes?
No substitutes, Chair.
We'll move on to declarations of interest. Do we have any received in advance?
We have none received in advance, Chair.
Any further declarations? Councillor Baker?
Yeah, apologies. I should have given it in advance, but you never know how long you're going to be in post. So I should declare that as current Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport at Kent County Council, I'll take part in the debate. I won't take part in any of the votes because the recommendations, many of which will be coming to me as the decision maker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. And you, Paul?
And I'd just like to make an announcement. I'm a former member of staff of South Eastern who are on the panel at the front there, and also a current member of staff of Network Rail, also represented here tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Very open and transparent of you. Thank you. So let's move on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 18th of June 2024. So can we agree those minutes as a true record? Everyone's happy with that? Thank you. Item 5, public participation. We have one public speaker who will be heard directly before the relevant item number 9. So I think we can move on to the first substantive item for this evening, and very much like to thank Network Rail thank the railway authorities providing not one but two speakers tonight, because we have Andrew Wood from Network Rail and we have Nina Peake from South Eastern Railway. Nina reminded me that she was here to talk to us about the car parks around the rail station, I guess it would be 5 years ago. And Andrew, is this your first time or are you a returning visitor? First time, fantastic. Well, we hope you enjoy it. So if you've got a presentation you're going to kick off with. Yeah. So without further ado, Andrew, we're looking forward to your update on rail infrastructure. Please fire away.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Wood. I am a commercial scheme sponsor in Network Rail, and I currently lead the team that look after all of the enhancements or improvements in Kent. So we act as sponsors and we lead the projects to win money from government and from local government to deliver schemes. And what I'm going to talk to you about a few things today. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about some plans around Canterbury West, that we've been working on with the local authority, Canterbury City Council and South Eastern. I've got a few things to take you through there. I'll also talk about Sturry, potential at Sturry. I'll also talk about Whitstable and also some proposals, things we're thinking about at Canterbury East Station as well. Some of the slides have been provided by people other than me, so I'm not as hot on them as some of the slides that I'll take you through. But the first thing I'll talk to you about is what's on the screen now. It's about Canterbury West Station. The signalling that we use at Canterbury West is, it was introduced in the 1980s. It's getting very old. We need to replace it. So we have a scheme called East Kentbury Signalling Phase 3 to basically upgrade all of the signalling through Canterbury up to Minster with modern equivalent form. Now, when we change the signalling, because signalling is so dreadfully expensive, it always is the best time to make meaningful change to the railway. So it provides a golden opportunity for us, once every 30 or 40 years, would you believe, to actually make change at lowest cost. So we propose to make some changes to the track layout at Canterbury that will enable a number of improvements that we aspire to deliver with support from Canterbury City Council and other funders, and the Department for Transport as the principal funder. What we are hoping to do is, those of you that will know Canterbury West Station will know that the country-bound platform has some track that runs around the back of it, around the outside. I will be showing a map in a minute that will show all of this. But there's a track that runs around the back of that platform too. And there's an opportunity, because it's not used very much, an opportunity to remove it, and that will enable a number of things to happen. So the recycling scheme is ongoing, and we have made a bid to government for more funding so that we can make all the changes at Canterbury to upgrade the signalling further and to make all the changes to the track layout. We are currently, so we've made our bid over the summer. The problem is we have been held up by the general election that was called just at the point where we'd made our bid. And following the general election, there is a governmental spending review underway, and the Department for Transport's budget is not protected. It's not one of those ones which is protected. We're waiting for the outcome of that spending review, and the first we'll get to hear of it actually is when Rachel Reeves stands up in Parliament and talks about her priorities, and then there'll be more information coming out there afterwards. The spending review is in 2 phases. So phase 1 will be, well, 30th of October is when Rachel Reeves will stand up, and we'll get to find out afterwards over the following days. News will come out over the detail of her plans and the government's plans. That's phase 1, which is predominantly the next few years. Phase 2 is due to come out in March, and that will be allied with a 10-year investment plan. That's what the government are hoping to prepare. So future plans, most of them will be presented out in March, but the first chance that we'll get to hear whether we've won any funding for this scheme will be in November. Now, the plan that I'll take you through in a minute takes away the track at the back of the platform too, and it will also help reduce the length of time the barriers are down at St Dunstan's level crossing and at St Stephen's level crossing. And I'm aware that people feel quite strongly about the level of congestion associated with those crossings, particularly St Dunstan's, and as a result, the level of pollution in the town. And when we built our business case to try and justify the investment, that was an element, a costed element within there. So we were able to include that, which was good. So it reduced those barrier downtimes. The cost that we're asking government to fund is overall between about 10.6 and 11.9 million. I give a range because we've only done some desktop work at the moment. What we've asked for is £2 million of that money so we can get started with the detail of the design. Now, you might say, well, what will that provide? What will that enable, that project? So by changing the layout of the tracks at Canterbury West, that will enable us to work with, hopefully, Canterbury City Council to look at a new northern station entrance on Roper Road, which I know has been a long-held aspiration, but it's been difficult because of that track that runs around the back of the platform. If you get rid of the track, it makes it a lot easier. So that station entrance could be a standalone building, or it could be part of a much wider development. And colleagues at Tales of England have been developing some ideas around an innovation campus on Roper Road, and it could form an integral part of that development coming forward. So we've been in conversation with them. Now, that new entrance, we think will be used by about 25% of all the people that use the station, coming from the north, particularly from the university. It will also help resolve a lot of the crowding that we see in the peak periods at the existing station entrance, which, as you know, is listed. So it kind of will take 25% of those people away, which will help congestion at the station. It also reduces the journey time for people from the north. The reason why this is a great opportunity is if we remove the track around the back of the platform, then we can put a ground level station entrance in, which makes it a lot cheaper to deliver. The cost is between about £3 and £4.5 million to deliver that. But the thing is, because it's not a national priority to resolve those overcrowding concerns, I mean, yes, it has crowding issues during the peak, but it's not as bad as a lot of other stations nationally. It's not a national priority of government at the moment, so it would need to be fully funded by a third party, and we're talking to the City Council about how that might be funded going forward. I should also say, if you know the station on platform 2, you'll know there's a waiting room there. It's not in the best state at the moment. There's also a few redundant buildings. So we've been talking to the Railway Heritage Trust as part of introducing the new station entrance on the northern side about renovating those buildings and providing a much more enjoyable experience for people that use them. So we've had those conversations already. So that's quite exciting, a new northern station entrance. But by changing the track at the station, what we can also do, if you've caught a 12-car train into Canterbury recently, you'll know that if you're in the back of the train, you have to walk through the back of the train to get off. Today, the platforms are only long enough for 8-car trains, and we have a lot of 12-car trains that are calling at the station. So it's not really the best first impression of Canterbury, particularly for visitors. And that's important because Canterbury is the most important off-peak location, traffic generator outside of London in Kent. So it's a really, really important market for South Eastern. So Nina and the head of South Eastern, Steve White, are fully behind this plan to provide longer platforms as well. The platform extensions will be at what we call the London end, so where St Dunstan's is. So we take the track away and you can extend the platforms up that end. We're hopeful that the country-bound platform will be long enough for the charter trains, which often come through, because that's quite an important part of their business. And the cost of that, we think, is at the moment between £3.6 and £4.8 million. The problem that we've had with that element of the works is the business case is weak. So we've really struggled to make a case for the delivery of those platforms. So a contribution from third parties is absolutely vital to enabling that to go ahead. So there's a lot of words on that slide. What I can now show you is a map, because you're probably wondering, oh my goodness, what are you talking about? So hopefully you'll be able to see the map in front of you there. So you can see Canterbury West Station. You can see, this is a rather old map because it doesn't show the multi-storey at Canterbury West. But you can see where the existing station entrance is. And what I'd like to point out to you, first of all, the area on the right-hand side, which is dotted in red, is the area that will be affected by the track changes where we take the track out around the back of platform 2. It's rarely used, so we have the opportunity to do that. But that provides an opportunity, working with the City Council, to develop on Roper Road site, including a new Northern Station entrance. And we feel that having a kiss and ride facility on that side would be very useful for the people that don't want to queue in their cars at St Dunstan's. They just want to drop people off and go. So we think that would be quite useful as well. You'll also see, as I mentioned before, the platform extensions up the top there in green. We're able to put those platform extensions in if we take all the track away. So it enables that as well. And as I've said, we're working with City Council and Towers of England Development Board to look at what the future of that that space on Roper Road could be. Because when you add up all the different parcels of land, that's quite a big piece of land. There is a Plumbers Merchants as well, but that's not part of railway land. Everything outlined in red is railway land. What I should also say, just to mention the signal box. So if you've been to the station, you'll remember there's a rather delightful signal box that sits over the tracks. With the resignaling scheme, that becomes redundant, so it won't be in use. So we have to think about what we do with that in the future. We might gift that to a heritage railway, or we have been talking to the Towers of England Board about the potential to reuse that as a means of crossing the railway and providing a heritage feature. It's a rather weird and wacky idea, but it's a wonderful idea. Using it as the means to cross the as another means to cross the railway. So that concludes what I wanted to say on Canterbury West. So we are waiting to hear if we will get the funding from government. Funding is incredibly tight. So, it's 50-50 whether we will get the money or not. However, what we have done is we've proven to government the case for this is really strong. So if we don't get the money now, then we're hopeful of getting the money in the near future. And then obviously that enables lots of other things to happen as well. Would you like me to continue my presentation or break there for any questions?
Well, usually we do go through to the end.
Okay.
How many items have you got?
That's the biggest one.
Okay.
And I've got 3 others.
Should we break, Preston, now and take some questions now? What's in people's minds?
Is there any?
Have we got some questions on this scheme, or do you want to? Okay, all right, we'll press on. And then
Okay.
People might come back.
All right, jolly good. Right. The next thing I'd like to talk about is Canterbury East Station. It's I'm from Kent originally, and I used to travel into Canterbury East all the time, and that used to be the busiest station in Canterbury, didn't it? And then with the advent of High Speed 1, suddenly Canterbury West is the busiest station, and Canterbury East has is quieter as a result. As a result, the car park there isn't as busy as one would like, and we are thinking about how, and working with the council over how we might develop that land for the benefit of the local area. So we're looking at a potential opportunity of delivering some more housing there. Of course, any money that we are able to raise through property development on the site is reinvested in the railway. All of it is reinvested in the railway. There may be an opportunity to reduce the car park size there, just based on its usage. We have lots of car parks around the southeast which aren't used anywhere near as much as they were before the pandemic, because people are working from home a lot more. And in particular at Canterbury East, it's a lot less busy than it used to be. Canterbury West is the main station now. And of course, any funds that we do raise through the development of this land, we can use to help fund station improvements in Canterbury. There's definitely a desire to do that. So we're in consultation with some internal stakeholders in South Eastern about what this might look like. And we're looking at some match funding potentially to explore some potential funding opportunities. And it's very much a proposal at this stage, but I thought I'd share that with you. Sturry. Those of you that will know Sturry Station, you'll know that it's by a level crossing with the tracks, with the platform on either side. And we have a current issue at Sturry where the platforms are only long enough for 6-car trains. And when 12-car trains and 8-car trains stop there, it blocks the crossing. So we have looked at the potential to extend those platforms. You'd think that extending platforms is easy. It's not, because you need to make sure you move services out of the way. In this instance, we'd have to close a crossing. There's lots of electrical equipment that we'd need to move as well. We'd have to think about neighbours as well. It's quite difficult when you put a platform, extend a platform at the end of people's gardens, so you have to think about that too. It's quite a challenge, I can tell you. So we've been working with Canterbury City Council, who've have an ambition to lengthen the platforms. Now we think the project cost will be between £3 and £7 million, depending on how cheap we can deliver how easily we can deliver the platforms. Obviously, the cheaper, the better. And there's an opportunity here to integrate it with the resignaling scheme, so we can share all the disruptive access to deliver the works. The funding would have to come from a third party, because there is no funding that we can provide for this, as there are minimal benefits to the railway per se. We've also been in discussions about ticket vending. So one of the questions was, well, could we provide a ticket vending machine on the London-bound platform, because the current ticket vending machine is only on the country-bound platform today. The problem that we have is we're unable to, well, South Eastern are unable to make a case for putting a second TVM in. However, there is an opportunity the train operator are looking at for selling tickets in local shops. So, for example, the post office, I think, has been identified on Surrey side, and South Eastern are working with the Department for Transport to see if they can start rolling out this new pay zone idea in local retail in Surrey and other places. So we're keeping our eyes peeled on that at the moment, waiting for government approval. So that's Surrey. And then my final slide, you'd be pleased to know, is Whitstable. So those of you will know that there's works ongoing at the moment at Herne Bay to provide accessibility with lifts and a bridge. That project will open by March next year. We are on site at the moment, so we're confident that will be delivered. And there have been calls for repeating that, providing accessibility at Whitstable Station. Now, the station itself today is accessible on both sides of the railway. It's just not accessible. There's no accessible bridge. So you can access the platforms from either side, but then there's a very long walking route between 600 and 900 metres to actually get around to the other platform, and it's not particularly level either. So it is an opportunity to provide access for all at this station. What I can tell you is the railway works in control periods. We're currently in what's called Control Period 7, 2024 to 2029. The nominations and the choices for accessibility across the country have already been decided for the next 5 years. So if you are seeking investment from government at Whitstable, it would be for the following 5 years, so 2029 to 2034, unless, of course, you want to fund it. And if you want to fund it, then we can deliver it. But if you're looking for government to provide the majority of funding, then we're talking about what we call Control Period 8, which is 2029 to 2034. And what we can tell you from our experience of delivering these things all over the South is that if we're able to secure contributions of funding towards the project, you have a much greater chance of securing government money. Indeed, government are having to prioritise amongst the current schemes, and they are one of the prioritisations is how much third-party money is being provided. So my advice here is very strongly, if you're able to provide a contribution, this really will push Whitstable up the prioritisation list. A really good example of where that has happened is at Battle. So Battle Station on its own in East Sussex, I think it is, wouldn't really have been a very high priority station for accessibility. But Rother District Council, the Railway Heritage Trust and Battletown Council have all pledged a sum total of more than £1 million towards providing accessibility at that station. And as a result, it was selected, and as a result, it has been prioritised. So that's what I would urge you to do. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Lots of excellent insights in there, and thank you for the slides and the maps. And by the way, the slides will be circulated to all of us after the meeting. Before I take questions, open up for a discussion. We are only noting the report tonight. It's not a decision as such. But before I open up the discussion, Nina, would you like to add anything?
Moved on. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. So all sorts of exciting ideas coming forward for Canterbury, and we're very supportive of what's coming on. Roper Roads has been something that's been mentioned. Well, I've been in this role 17 years, and I think 15 years of it at least, I've spoken to various people, Richard, Ruth, have all said it's been a desire of a council. Canterbury East Station, Ruth said to me pre-COVID, wouldn't it be lovely if we had an entrance on the other side of a station to improve that accessibility? So again, another station that has been on the agenda for a while. And of course, Surrey with those platform extensions. If you've ever tried to have the unfortunate need to drive to Margate or through that road and get caught when the barrier's down, and it is for quite a while, obviously, because people have to get off and on the train. So it does take time. As we said, we're looking at doing something new there with the ticketing. In the past, we've wanted to put a ticket vending machine at Surrey, but we haven't actually got the power and comms to be able to do it on that platform without a lot of cost. So the business case has never added up to do it. So at the moment, our commercial director is saying, okay, how can we sell tickets? A lot of people now are buying them online. So this is one of the ways a lot of people are now purchasing tickets. We have still got the ticket office where people can purchase tickets. We've also got the ticket vending machine on that side. And then, as we said, the other thing was looking at what's being trialled elsewhere in the country. And that's this pay zone. So again, we're waiting to find out a little bit more about that and how that's worked elsewhere. And once we know more about that, we can tell you a bit more about it. So all really exciting things. So just going back, just looking at some of your presentations there. Yep, Canterbury West, right, we've done those, all very good. And as we said, going back to, if you want a footbridge at Whitstable, start lobbying your MP and start getting letters in and start making noise, shall we say. So for your MP, to us, to Network Rail, just be noisy. Let them know how much it means to you. So that would be my advice. On another note, I have got a tiny little bit of good news for you. I was just checking just beforehand on the timetable. December, we've got a new timetable coming out. And it says here, I'll read it out to you, it's on our website, but for the Ramsgate to London Charing Cross service, to fill an hour gap between Charlton and Chilham, the 0844 Ramsgate to Charing Cross service will run at 0842 with additional stops at Charlton and Chilham. So it'll be 0911 at Charlton and 0914 at Chilham. So very minor, small change, but hopefully it's really going to make a difference for your local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Do either of the officers want to comment? And in fact, one thing that might be helpful, imagine yourself, Richard, is whether the draft local plan, I appreciate it's only a draft, whether it had earmarked potentially any sums towards any of the projects which Andrew set out.
Yeah, I was going to talk about funding because obviously the slide says Canterbury City Council will fund it. It won't be Canterbury City Council. But of course, our two main funding streams are obviously Section 106, where developers have to pay to mitigate their impact. So we will continue to look at those sites. but going forward, SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, will be our main funding stream. All of the schemes that Andrew mentioned are in a draft SIL schedule. What we need to do as the council is to try and prioritise those somehow. Obviously, our transport strategy, we've been saying, is bus-led primarily, but we haven't obviously ruled out any improvements to rail. So there will be a report coming to Canterbury City Council councillors in due course to try and prioritise some of that SIL spend going forward.
Thank you. I think that concludes all of our speakers. So yeah, let's discuss it. And I know first of all we had Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a few points really. I think it's great to hear all these things happening, and I know that Kent's draft local transport plan 5 often makes quite a bit of mention of rail improvements, these included as well. So I think we are all on similar pages. If we are still not entirely clear where the funding will come from, but 'twas ever thus, was it not? A couple of bits really. You mentioned about how Sturry, you're looking at the trial and towards the DFT for using other retail units to sell tickets, which I think could be a very good thing, because while many people, myself included, will now have the electronic tickets straight into our Google wallets and use it that way, which is incredibly helpful, there will always be people who can't or choose not to. As part of that, will other stations within the district be looked at for that? I have previously raised an issue of Cheswold and Swelcliffe Station, for example, which has a single ticket machine, which is vandalised as soon as it's repaired. And actually, given the low numbers you need a physical ticket, there are shops nearby. If that pilot does work, could that also be looked at there as well and actually remove the ticketing facility entirely? I think that would be very helpful, both from a broken window syndrome for the area and also your ongoing maintenance costs. Secondly, the Whitstable, the Herne Bay Railway Bridge, it's coming on very well. Look forward to that being opened. Whitstable, I think, does need a little bit of TLC, given next year marks 200 years since the Act of Parliament passed that gave rise to the Canterbury and Whitstable Railway. And of course, as we in this room know, that the international growth of passenger rail really did start from Whitstable, despite what others in the country may think. So I think we do need to look at that. We do need to look at that. But one thing I would raise about Whitstable, and I appreciate both car parks you have there on the up and down sides are now privately run by APCO. One confusion often gets passed to me is that there are 2 separate codes on APCO for those car parking, and the number of people who pay to park on the wrong side and then end up being given a fine by the private company, even though they've paid the same amount of money they would have done if they paid on the right side. So perhaps if you could go away and have a chat with them at some point, that would be quite useful to join both of the numbers for the car parks together. That's incredibly parochial, but actually, as someone who uses the railway, not as much as I'd like, but quite often to get to Maidstone and back via Strood and then Maidstone Barracks from Herne Bay, I quite enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to future of rail, both passenger, be it commuter or leisure, and also very much, as KCC are looking at through LTP5, getting more freight onto the rails and off of the roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. What I might do is have a few questions, and then we can see if we've got some comments in response. So, Naomi.
Thank you, Chair. With the SIL money, most of these developments are quite some distance from train stations. It would maybe be quite a good idea that we could have integrated pricing, a bit like an Oyster card, so that you get the bus and you get the train journey and you only pay once. And I want to know what if anybody's working towards that, so that, because I understand you're working with South Eastern and Stagecoach or Regency or whoever's going to be providing all the hopper buses we're going to have to take people right from these new estates. So I just wondered where we were going to be with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, we haven't got any other questions, but I will ask one. I was wondering, Keith as well. I was wondering whether, given you've got interesting projects at both the Canterbury stations, and it seemed like, funnily enough, Canterbury East, if you develop the car park, there might be a sort of surplus capital receipt of that one, whereas to do what we want to do at Canterbury West, there's probably a deficit, funding requirement, even with that bit of land, I would imagine. Are you able to sort of transfer from east to west, or is it essentially the case that Network Rail would sort of snaffle the surplus capital receipt from Canterbury East, thus leaving Canterbury West with nothing? Let's have Keith's question as well.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One is on the signal box. I agree that the signal box at Canterbury West is rather fine, but the one at Canterbury East, I would say, is even finer, and it's in a very sorry state and in need of a lot of TLC in order to bring it back into looking its best. It's a rather much, a very fine structure, I would say, architecturally. That was the first point. And there's another point related to that is I think my instinct would be to leave the signal box at Canterbury West in its current location rather than wrench it out and put it somewhere else. That's my instinct, because it would, it adds to the historic value of the station, I think, personally. And the other is a question about Sturry Station and whether you've considered opening a station at Hersden with the increasing population there, a large number of new houses being built and possibly more in the future, and whether maybe a station at Hersden could replace Sturry Station and you could close Sturry Station because of all the problems at Sturry. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't wish to make this an extended memory test, so I think what we'll do is we'll take those 4 questions and then we'll come on to the Mel and David, who also wish to speak. So you can take them in any order.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the support for the pay zone. I think once we see how that trial has gone, I think it would be a really good idea to start looking and seeing where it could be used. So I've made a note for Chescliffe and Swale. Lovely. Yep, I've got it on here. And we'll also go back and have a look both of us about the car parks at Whitstable. I think what the issue is I think it's possible that one of the car parks is a Network Rail car park and the other one's a South Eastern. So you've got 2 different landowners. It's like having Barclays and Lloyds Bank. So having the one code, I think, is probably what causes a problem. But we will go back, we will check, we will come back to you on that. Naomi, you mentioned about bus tickets. There is a ticket called Plus Bus. Now, I don't know how widely it works in the Canterbury area. However, I do know the commercial director for Stagecoach buses, and I will get in touch with him and ask him whether it's something that could be developed further. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, and you should be able to buy it already at the at a station, a ticket vending machine, and online. So where it is available, then we do it, and you can also do it for the other end of your journey as well. So that's all available. Keith, your signal box question. I'm going to leave that one for Network Rail, and a station at Hersden. Just out of interest, how many houses are planned for around Sturry? Because there was plans, wasn't there, some time ago for a new development there? 800. I had a feeling there was going to be several thousand. I thought it was.
Yeah, big number like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
lovely. Thank you for confirming that for me. I'll leave Andrew to pick up the other questions.
Thanks, Nina. So just in terms of the surplus, so if we were to develop Canterbury Station, we are able to ring fence those, the capital receipts for the benefit of Canterbury and at Canterbury West. The land at Canterbury West that we would seek to release, it's right by the station, it's quite valuable. And absolutely, we would ring fence it towards the scheme that we want to deliver at Canterbury West. Of course, if you deliver something at Canterbury East, and we can use that money at Canterbury West, but we'd also seek to try to do something at Canterbury East anyway, so the people that use it can see some benefit too. So the answer is yes. Hurston Station. So it's not something that I'm particularly familiar with. We do have other examples where we have built and open stations and closed other ones. There is a proposal near Ashford at Lenham, I think, to create a new town, Heathfield, I think it's called. And that might involve closing Lenham Station and opening a new station. So it's an interesting proposal. It will come down, though, to the business case for building a new station. And that, I'm afraid, is linked to the number of houses that you build. The more houses, the better. So, for example, the colleagues I work with at Folkestone Hythe, the council, looking at Otterpool Park and the proposals there, and how all of the development there is helping the upgrade costs for that existing station. So it's a kind of, you need to get a critical mass. The signal boxes. So I'll take Canterbury East signal box away. I will ask our buildings asset team to see when it's next due to be renovated. What I can say is the Access for All bridge at Canterbury East, we have noticed that it's not looking as good as it could be. So there are some questions ongoing at the moment around some of the cladding and why that's fading quite quickly. So your colleague Peter mentioned that, so we're taking that up at the moment. And then Canterbury West signal box. Yeah, I mean, we're talking to Towers of England who are quite interested in the possibility of it becoming a means to cross the railway. And you can just imagine all the levers behind a Perspex screen as part of a heritage feature. So, yeah, I think if we were to move it to a heritage railway, we would keep the structure in place, because they wouldn't be interested in the structure, but you've moved the signal box. What I can say is the structure itself has quite a large liability in terms of just keeping it safe and making sure that it looks okay. Obviously, it's a listed building, so we've got to keep it looking reasonably well. But there is actually an ongoing cost to making sure that that is safe for those, for the railway and for those in the future that might use it. But I'll take that away as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I was just going to say, on you were asking how many new homes in Hurston, and amazingly, in actually item 10 tonight, page 60, there's a map with that information on. So it's about 1,500 in Hurston itself, and then more further afield. So there we go. There's an answer we gave you earlier. So I have got Mel, and then David Thomas, and then Paul, and then I think I'll wrap up the questions at that stage. So Mel first.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Yeah, they just wanted to highlight, and I think you have been in conversations with one of your colleagues anyway about the Hackerton Place tunnel. I know it's a strange one. I just wanted to bring it up in this meeting so that it's on the radar. But yeah, there are a few issues with it because it's very well used access for many people getting to the station. And it's a funny one, quite complex, because KCC are responsible for the drain, CCC are responsible for the path, and then you are the bridge. And because of the nature of the bridge, it kind of goes on an angle, so the visibility is very poor, and it's not a very pleasant tunnel to go through, especially at night. Canterbury have done a few things, like put up mirrors. They just get pulled down, unfortunately. And there's an issue with the lighting because there's also people's homes there as well, so you can't have too bright. But I just wanted to get it on the agenda with yourselves to please go and have a look at it and maybe talk to your colleague. He's called Mr. Stevenson, I think. Yes, Harry Steve, yeah. And I know he has spoken to one of the officers, Miss Gowdy, anyway, about it. And there is some funding coming down for the cycle path, so some improvements will be made, but it won't be the whole package, if you like. So I wonder if we can sort of continue having that conversation. I think the funding issue did come up, but it would just be so great to make some proper improvements there. And at the moment, I am trying to there's a light that's completely covered by a tree at the moment, so it's really, really, really dark walking down there. And and it's privately owned. It's just kind of quite, as a councillor, it's my ward, it's kind of very complex area to try and actually do anything about because there's so many partners, and it would be nice, it would be great if we could just get some movement on it. Regarding the signal box, I've always fancied that as a very, very cool bar, but it wouldn't be, it would be extremely cool, but it wouldn't be very accessible because there's no lift access. But, you know, if someone fancies that, then let me know because I'll be the first customer.
Thank you. David?
Just clarification really from Richard. You mentioned about the SIL money. Is the SIL money in the local plan designated for the buses or the rail or both? Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Paul.
Thank you. My question, and obviously I do have some insight into this with my day job and my previous day job, is around the interior configuration of Canterbury West, because obviously, as you rightly reflected, it's a really busy station, and I use it probably 3-4 times a week. Going up in the mornings, it's not a problem. Morning peak times, obviously very easy getting out onto the platform. People know what to do with the 12-car trains on an 8-car platform. Coming back in the evening is much more of a difficulty, and you can spend 5 minutes just leaving the station. Frequent mutterings among people on the platforms asking why can't they just open more gates? Well, I probably know the answer in that obviously the gates do have to be closed because you do have to protect revenue, and that's even more important, particularly in the post-COVID environment. Do you have any thoughts around how the sort of ticket hall area of Canterbury West could be reconfigured? Because you do have a bit more space. You've got very few ticket gates, a real logjam of people. And is that dependent on the wider scheme, which obviously you're waiting on a funding decision for? Because it's one of the sort of things I see most obviously. Just finally, I'll just say I agree with Mel on the accessibility point. That signal box is wonderful. It's a wonderful feature of Canterbury. But I would have concerns about accessibility because you do want to show off this great structure, this really unique structure. I would support it staying in place, but I would worry about getting from each side, particularly for people with mobility difficulties. Thank you.
Over to you. And no need to answer the question about the bar, but the rest of them would be good to get a response on.
I like the idea of a bar. I come to Canterbury a lot, and I do enjoy your nighttime economy, shall we say. Okay, so Paul, if I look to address your concern there, I totally understand what you're saying. When we reconfigured that booking hall probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, and at that point in time, we only had, believe it or not, one door each side of that station, and we came here and went through the listed building consent to get 3 doors each side. This was roughly around about the time of the introduction of high speed, so that would have been between 2009 and pre-Olympics. So that's when we were involved in that scheme. At that point in time, we had no idea how footfall would grow at Canterbury West, to be quite honest with you. And totally with you, I think we all agree we need more ticket gates so that we can have more open, because at the moment they're not quite aligned with those gates, with the doors. And if we had more more gates in that gate line, you could really improve the footfall through it. So if people have got their tickets ready, on average, you'll get 30 people a minute through each gate. That's the numbers. We have tried several times with business cases to the Department for Transport to try and get funding to increase the gate line, including most recently with a fund called ERGI funding, which Andrew can tell you what it means because I can't remember. But unfortunately, we weren't successful in that bid. So we are aware, I'm with you, and if we can't get it funded before the bigger scheme comes up, I will be nudging Andrew to say, give us a bit of that funding, because it'll make an immediate difference on where 75% of those passengers are coming through.
If I can come in there. One of the things that we want to do as part of the new northern entrance is relocate the mess room to provide a bigger mess room, because it's too small today for the staff. That might create more space in the existing station building to make a rearrangement. The ERGI fund is the industry revenue generating initiative. And it was money that was granted by government to that would lead to an increase in revenue, because government pumps £2 billion worth into rail each year, and it needs to try to reduce that. So any initiatives to do that, that's what that fund was for. It looks for quite a quick payback though, and that's where some of these gate line schemes foundered earlier this year. So with regard to the tunnel, which I think is at Station Road West. Am I thinking of the right tunnel? Is it by the new development? Yeah, it is. And I understand that tunnel floods as well. So I think I've tried to walk through it once and it was flooded. So you've got a flooding issue there as well. So I will take that away. I'll talk to Harry about where he's getting on with that. What I will say is I was involved with Ashford Borough Council to renovate a very similar tunnel to the east of Ashford Station that's used by a lot of school children through to the housing development next door, and that's been quite successful. And we've combined money from our structures team and money from Ashford Borough Council to renovate the tunnel and improve the lighting, and in fact put some lovely fancy lighting in as well. So that's an example of work that we've done elsewhere, where we've used a combination of funding to upgrade it. So I can take that away as well and see what we can do at that tunnel.
Sorry. Hi. Just one thing. If you wanted to see that, I can easily come to Ashford. There's an office in Ashford that I can work in. So if you wanted to come over and see that, I can meet you at the station and walk you down and show you that, if that helps.
And did I hear, sorry, that there was a vegetation issue at the tunnel as well? So I can get someone on that straight away.
So there's actually an item under the Levelling Up cycle and walking schemes. The first project is St Stephen's Pathway. So we've got funding for some of these things anyway. We've identified drainage, we've identified the pinch point. So we've got funding. So I think it's really, assuming it gets approved tonight as a scheme that we can use that Levelling Up funding for, we can then touch base with both Network Rail and South Eastern to make sure we get the consents in place so we can get those sort of actions implemented. And just before absolutely, we need to make sure all the sort of stakeholders can do it. The question about SIL, obviously the SIL regulations, they're quite restrictive on what the charging authorities, Canterbury City Council, the charging authority from their planning process. We are collecting money now, and the items we can collect it for are transport infrastructure, open space environment, and obviously KCC education. We need to decide how that money gets divvied up. On the transport side of it, yes, we've said it's a bus-led strategy, but we will set out, and we have set out in a draft SIL schedule, all of the rail, road and bus improvements that we think are needed till 2040 now. What we haven't decided is how they will be prioritised. So that's the next stage of spending, if you like. It will be a cost-benefit basis. So we'll look at how many people will actually benefit from these activities based on the sort of the cost. And obviously rail, unfortunately, is generally a much bigger cost than most other things. But that will come to council in the near future.
In the meantime, we can all lobby Councillor Ricketts with our own views on that particular conundrum. Fantastic. Well, look, that was a great hour, so thank you. It's very informative. Enjoyed the discussion. We note the report, look forward to the slides, and a few things to follow up on, but thank you very much. And you don't leave empty-handed. Here's your map. Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, feel free to spend the rest of the evening as you wish. 5 more items here, or try out one of those bars. So, thank you. So let's move swiftly on to the next item, which is item 7, Gas Street Parking TRO. I think, Richard Moore, you will be introducing this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just talking about Levelling Up Fund, and obviously one of the major projects is the work around the Norman Castle, and I think there's a plan in the report that shows the proposals there. What would be of great benefit would be if we could improve the access point into the castle from Gas Street. And the plan shows how our consultants believe it could be improved with greening up the area, creating a different a floorscape, and just opening it up. So if you walk past Gas Street at the moment, you wouldn't even notice the entrance is there. So to do that, we would need to take away approximately 3 car parking spaces. At the moment, there's a long line of parking bays. Approximately 9 can be accommodated there at the moment. So if we wanted to implement this particular design, we'd have to remove 3 spaces. We've obviously consulted on that through the TRO process. There are 4 objections. And obviously, I think at least 3 of the objections are from residents. We've done surveys along Gas Street. And generally, Gas Street is part of the city centre zone, which is oversubscribed, we know. But generally, there are sufficient spaces in Gas Street to accommodate the loss of these 3 spaces. I checked again this evening at 6:30. There was 4 cars parked there. So we believe it's a good improvement, and it's worth the loss of these 3 bays. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, this is an item which we will need to vote on at the end. So let's open it up to questions. Anyone got any comments, questions? Paul?
Yeah, just to say, thank you, Chair. I do strongly support, obviously, the improvements that are proposed for the Canterbury Castle, a much sort of forgotten historic monument, really. And it's really good that it's getting the funding that it so desperately requires. I did look quite carefully at the representations from local residents, and I just wondered, are there any measures we can take to allay some of their fears around loss of spaces? I did note one person in particular has a particular accessibility need, and they haven't chosen to have a space marked out for a disabled person's space. But is there anything else we can do just to sort of allay their concerns, really? And that was the only comment I had to make on that one.
If that person is eligible for a disabled bay, they probably felt they hadn't needed to in the past because there's always been ample capacity. If we lose 3 spaces and this person finds that there is difficulty, they may choose to go down that route. And obviously, if they comply, they will get they will get a blue badge that they can use.
Yep, I've got Mel next.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, whilst I appreciate all the work that's gone on to make the castle keep this wonderful space through the Levelling Up funding, I am concerned. I'm just following on from my colleague here about the loss of spaces, and there's nothing in the report that talks about an alternative for those people. Well, not that I could read, and there's already not enough spaces to go around for the amount of people who've got permits. So by taking it away, you're taking more spaces away for people who are struggling to find spaces. So is there any mitigations you're doing to replace those 3 spaces? And And if it's to go in the car park, then, well, just it would be interested to hear what you say. Yeah, and it just seems that the plans that were, I mean, I'm kind of coming from the side of the residents here, I guess, because I know I can sort of imagine how they're feeling, and I know, and I can see that it's going to be a beautiful project, but they didn't. They're losing out because of it, and it feels like the designs were made by professionals who may not have even thought about their situation, and they just came up with designs, and we're sort of taking them on. I just wonder how much intel they had when they were coming up with these designs to sort of. It was the brief, oh, we want to have a nice entrance and we want to consider the people who are living here as well, or was it just we're going to come up with a nice entrance? So I know there's issues down there from the comments about poor lighting and all this sort of stuff as well. And some people have suggested about the pavement on the side of the road. Is that something that could be done instead? And is there another way of skinning a cat, if you like, another way of making sure the residents don't lose their parking and also have the good entrance?
So Gas Street is part of the wider city centre zone. So that's the first thing to say. When we've done surveys in the past, Gas Street has been one of the few streets. We do surveys around about 9 o'clock at night when everyone's back from work, most people are back from work. So that's the highest demand. Gas Street is one of the few streets that's had surplus. So I think there is spare capacity to reduce these spaces without impacting on the residents. But those residents who've got city centre permits could use other, I mean, Worthgate Place, Castle Row, there are bays there that are also fairly underused. So it's not we're taking away their space and they've got nowhere to park. It might make it a little bit more difficult, but my feeling is that there is spare capacity to reduce it by 3.
Thank you. David? Quickly, because we've already got 7 people speaking.
It's just not what I hear from the residents. I hear that a lot of residents struggle to find spaces and the amount of very few spaces that there are. So I don't know. It's just different messages I'm getting.
Certainly, the city centre, it's a big zone. If you imagine the high street dividing it in half, those spaces to the east, so Pound Lane, all that area, Westgate Hallway, always packed out. Never get space. The spaces this side, Castle Street. So in Castle Street, there's some Worthgate Place, Castle Row. There's usually some spare capacity when we've done our surveys.
Thank you. David?
Need to declare an interest, Chair. I do work for Lead and Lettings, and they're shown on this map. So on this item, I will abstain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Naomi?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also read the sort of objections, and there's a suggestion that this is an area of, dreadful crime and drug dealing, and maybe people don't want to park the car down there because they feel that the cars are vulnerable. So maybe what are we doing to make the whole of this landscape a much brighter, safer space, possibly? And if there is a desire for people who live in these in the homes here, that I know that Castle Street's not one of our best used car parks, that we could maybe let spaces in a Castle Street car park for people who asked, if there was a over demand for people who live on this street. But certainly there's reading what people have said, it's like, oh, it's a terrible, so maybe the whole point is there is always space there because people feel quite vulnerable with their cars.
Yeah, there is certainly an element of that. It's a dark road, and we know all our multi-stories attract unsavoury behaviour. So I think it's possibly a spill out from the Castle Street multi as well. The council are investing £400,000 in improvements to Castle Street multi-story, so better lighting, CCTV, painting, that will help. But this will help itself, but because it will make it a lighter and more attractive street. So that should deter hopefully some of the antisocial behaviour that happens.
I mean, could it be that this becomes something more like what you call a play street? Something that's much more of a place that the community comes out and uses the street as a more of an outside space because it is so close up to the castle walls.
It could well do. I mean, it's already, there's no curb, so it's already a space that people could use. Yeah, I think, so there's potential definitely for that to happen.
Thank you. I've got Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's just a very quick point. Some of my colleagues here this evening seem to be struggling with the removal of a few spaces, and they've asked Richard what the availability and the mitigation is, and I think it's fair enough, some of the response that's been given. It was just merely on the wider point that actually, if we're going down this route of a bus-first strategy, that actually vast swathes of on-street parking are going to have to be removed, whether that's South Canterbury Road, Old Dover Road. I'm sure there's a number of other areas that will come up that actually, if we're going to have the courage of our convictions to go down this route in terms of removing spaces and making it nicer and climate change and all these kind of things, we absolutely need to progress with these items rather than a few spaces because one or two residents don't like it. If that's the case, then good luck with the local plan and the transport assessment as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Finally, I believe, Alex, one more from Dane, and then we'll probably draw stumps on this.
Yeah, just to say, as obviously the cabinet member on Canterbury City Council for this area as well, listed in the minutes, and actually Mr. Thomas has made my point, part of my point for me there, that it does fit in with the wider strategy of reducing the number of spaces in the city centre, although that's not what this is about. And I think with the residents' concerns there, if you go down Gas Street, there are always spaces there, resident spaces there. It's not spaces available to anyone else. They're resident spaces. They are not well used. I've certainly, and since been looking at this item, I go through there on a fairly regular basis, and I've never seen it full. But with those concerns about accessibility from one resident and the concerns about availability, there are solutions available. There is a wider issue in terms of applying for residence permits, which we are looking to make a bit easier, and that's something that particular resident can have a look at. And as Richard's already said, with the resident with accessibility issues, then applying for a blue badge and making sure that's available can be there. So we have taken into account those resident issues, but the wider point, which was made by a couple of respondents, is that it isn't a particularly pleasant place after dark. It doesn't really go anywhere, that road, so it's not a through road. Your idea of a play street, I think it could very well be that, because it really is pretty much resident access and cycling and walking only at the moment. And these improvements and the improvements to the castle, unlike as was advertised by somebody on the Canterbury Residents Group, it's not being turned into student accommodation, so I can allay that there. The keep will be, yeah. That was something that was suggested there, but it is part of a wider revitalisation of that whole part of the city, which is much needed. And actually, Gas Street is probably one of those areas that really will benefit hugely from not just a cosmetic facelift, but more footfall, more people coming to that part of the city. It will be safer, it will be more pleasant, and hopefully those residents in that street will be the major beneficiaries of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Some good points in there. And then we've got Dane.
Yeah, you spoke about sort of the disabled bays and blue badges, but that still doesn't mean that they would be able to park outside their house, because if you've got a blue badge or a disabled bay, anybody with those can still park there. So it doesn't actually guarantee you your space. And then you say it's sort of 15 metres. I'm just wondering what you could actually plant in that area that's in that space, because you'll have the road surface, you'll have the houses. So really it's just going to be a little bit of grass that you're going to have to maintain without smashing, like damaging the cars that are parked around it. So, I mean, I think the main thing is the opposite end of Gas Street. That's where all the naughtiness goes on, as such. You see it; it's really dark up that end, and that needs to be opened up. You've got to have some sort of lighting or something around there, because that's people will come out the castle, they'll go a little back street to get into town, and then they'll see that. So that's what's going to put people off. It's the opposite end of Castle Street on Gas Street. That's where the trouble. Well, the perceived trouble. You can see it with your own eyes. But yeah, I mean, it's not good to have, to get rid of spaces if they're disabled. And I guess it's in the middle because of the entrance, I guess, rather than all the cars in one space and then the grass, rather than try and mow and trim or whatever you're going to plant in between. But I just don't think you're going to be very restricted in what you can put there. Because, like, as I say, because of the road surface, because of the houses, and because of everything else. But that's it. I'll just be more interested in the top end really, and making that more safe. Thanks.
Have you got any comments about what is going there, be it planters or grass?
No, I
or-
mean, we've got our consultants, HTA, have done this, and yes, they did want more space at the beginning, so they did take a balance in. We said, look, we couldn't lose too many spaces, so they would have liked more, but they're happy with the space that we've offered them. And yes, it's something that the council, all of the sort of the green spaces that are being developed as part of the Levelling Up Fund are issues for the council that we'll have to fund. So we've taken that into account.
One quick thing, yeah. So when you, like, in the high street, just please don't put any box plants in again, because it's just pointless. Cheers.
Okay, thanks everyone. Had a good debate. A lot of people speaking on this item. We do need to have a recorded vote. Obviously, has been a discussion. We had Alex Ricketts has suggested some kind of mitigations, if you like, to address any concerns with the wider residence parking scheme, and Richard Moore's also talked about some of the lighting issues which might deal with the antisocial behaviour aspects. But ultimately, it is up to all of you to decide how you wish to vote. So I think that we are asked to recommend that the proposed removal of part of the parking bay on Gas Street is implemented, and if we agree that then it would be referred to Councillor Neil Baker as KCC cabinet member to implement that or not. So we're going to do a recorded vote. Lauren, will you get going? So I suppose a yes means you support losing those parking bays.
That is carried, Chair, with 9 votes for, 1 against and 2 abstained.
Okay, thank you very much. I would suggest we go straight on to item 8, and then maybe that'll be a natural time after that one to have a comfort break. Go on, Mel.
It's come up that I said no, but I said abstain.
Okay, can we manually mark that register of voting? So Mel was abstain, not no.
Yeah, I can change that, Mel. So you're abstained.
So then it would be,
That would be.
well, it will be the same outcome.
So that would be 9 for and 3 abstain.
Okay, thank you. As Rob Thomas rightly says, many more votes along those lines in the years ahead, I suspect. So we're on to cycle projects, also related to funding from Levelling Up. And once again, Richard, you will be presenting this item. Once again, we will have a recorded vote on this one again to see if we're in support of it. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as part of the Levelling Up Fund, we asked for an allocation for cycling improvements within the city centre, and we were successful in that. So with that sum of money, we've worked with Spokes. It's quite difficult. The city centre is obviously, as you know, very constrained, and lots of the cycle routes are already in place. So it's been a bit of a struggle trying to find schemes where to spend this money, ironically. As well as these schemes, we're doing cycle parking and cycle lockers and wayfinding. So they're all part of what we call the Interroute scheme. But these 6 specific projects have been identified, some of which are on highway, some of which are on city council land. So we've identified it's a bit of an outline design at this stage. So what we're asking JTB approval for is to proceed with the sort of the detailed design and then onto construction of these 6 routes. I won't go through them, but if you've got any questions on any of them, I will try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Maybe actually as a précis and a point I'll make is I when I was leading on cycling, working with Jeanette on transport 4 years ago, I worked with Ruth Gowdy and Spokes very closely on how we made access into and through the city of Canterbury more straightforward. As I recall, all of these items were in that document. And am I right, therefore, that all of these 6 are in our strategy document? Because we have the cycling, the LC WIP as it is now. So they're still in there. So they kind of have that kind of formal, we want to do this status, and this is the first time we've had the chance to fund them. Is that okay? That's, thank you for clarifying. So I've got Neil first of all, and then we'll have Mel.
I've just got a little bit of process wonkery, if I may, because at the top of the report, JTB tonight's big, sorry, my laptop is a lovely device. At the top of the report, schemes set out are approved for construction, and the summary and purpose approval is sought to proceed with design and construction, whereas at the bottom of the report we're talking about design and consultation, and of course consultation and construction are 2 very different things. So I was actually wondering which one it was, and also if it is the top one, what's the actual next step in the decision-making process? Because of course this isn't a decision-making body. So is it consultation? Is it construction? Who is this body approving or recommending to?
Yeah, we've got approval under the levelling up. So the City Council have the funding, and so we've got effectively the delegated decision to spend that funding. But some of these routes are on the highway, so effectively we need a approval, and we thought the JTB would be the right place to seek that approval. So that's why it's a little bit difficult. I think it's absolutely right that we are asking for your recommendation to proceed with the detailed construction. Where the elements are on highway, we will work with your officers to decide what element of consultation is needed. Some of it will be very formal, so Sun Street has got a TRO, so it's a formal consultation process. Other areas, Hackington Place, Ruth has already started talking to the residents down there. So we will do appropriate consultation. Does that answer your question, Neil?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's obviously split in 2, isn't it? Because there will be consultation, as and when needed under the TRO process. It's just it was a little bit different at the top and bottom, but yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Neil has kind of helped the question a little bit, because mine was, I mean, this is a great scheme. I'm glad to see that we're making improvements to our cycle paths. Just picking up on the Hackington Place, as I've mentioned before, there were a few issues with residents through my own consultation, if you like, about some of the layout of that. So we're not approving it, the whole scheme today, we're just approving the implementation of it. Is that correct? Just want to make that clear before I sort of vote for it, because there was a few little bits and bobs about how they were going to design that little area near the tunnel that I have had a couple of objections, not the whole scheme overall, but the way you're laying it out, and I wouldn't want to be voting for that tonight.
Yeah, well, I've got no intention of coming back to JTB for a sign-off of the detailed design. We effectively haven't got the time. So I think what I'm asking for is a delegated authority to work with KCC officers and to undertake the necessary consultation to get a scheme that is basically appropriate. If you want us to come back here, I would obviously do so, but it would hold up the scheme. And I don't think these 6 schemes are that controversial. If I thought they were, I would bring them back.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm not talking about just there's some little details in the Hackington Place one, such as removing the chicanes and things like that. The little, that's I've spoken to a lot of residents about it, and it's totally appropriate what they're saying. They don't want them removed. So by signing off tonight, is that little detail, where is it up with? I just want reassurance that.
The reassurance is that Ruth and myself won't do anything that's, we would involve the ward councillors in that decision. Let's say that.
You know, we've both written to you about it, and as has the chairs and secretaries of all the residents groups. Okay.
Alex?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, you still are Chair, indeed. I think to that point, this is to start the schemes moving. There's a lot of these, as Dan's already said, have been in place for a really long time, these plans. And again, it's another great example of the transport team wanting to get things done and finding the opportunity this time through levelling up to get those things funded, and a great example of where you plan ahead. And although it may have been possible to fund these from other ways, when the levelling up fund opportunity came along, then these plans are ready to rock and roll, and partly through KCC and Canterbury City Council plans. I've spoken to spokes, I've cycled a lot of these routes, and it's much needed work in a lot of these areas, and I think it's really, really fantastic to see these things happening. And as part of a wider transport policy, cycling is incredibly important. Just a point on process from Neil there, I suspect you'll be hearing about some parts of these and probably not hearing about some other parts of these. It's presented as a whole. I suspect ordinarily we would have taken each one of these paths as a separate item at JTB, but because it's all funded through LUF, it's come as a piece. I think it's quite nice to see them as a piece. I think it's probably something that we miss out on sometimes, as seeing the connectivity across the whole district, indeed. But when you look at little small stretches of cycle lanes, it's very difficult to get an idea of where they go to. So it is nice to see these all together, but I completely understand how that means when each of these are separate individual schemes, but we're being presented with them as a lot tonight. And the same thing goes for the Hackington Place issues. That scheme will be dealt with individually, as you would with any other cycle improvement scheme in an area. Ward councillors consulted, residents consulted, and as we've done with all of these other cycling improvements, it's about the hierarchy of needs in these areas, wheeling and walking through cycling and everything, and that will obviously be taken into account through all of these, as indeed it always is. So thank you.
And I would presume, Richard, to Alex's point, that where there's a couple of them which do require a TRO, they would come back here, even if they were not particularly controversial ones.
Only if they received objections.
Same rule as the parking review, the annual parking review. Okay, hope everyone's clear on that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then let's move to the vote. Members are asked to recommend that the 6 cycle route schemes set out in the report are approved for construction as part of the levelling up projects in Canterbury City Centre. But as I think you're clarifying, what you're really asking for is delegated authority to design and ultimately construct these. Well, I mean, I say all of that, it goes to Neil anyway to decide. So we're recommending those things that we just said to Neil. So if you vote for, you're voting in support of progressing these 6 cycle routes this evening.
That's carried, Chair, with 11 votes for and 1 abstained.
Right, so that's the first half of the meeting done. What do you think, Alex, as you're assuming the chair? Should we let people have a quick break? Hour and a half through. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for indulging me and leaving halfway through. Hope you enjoy the last 3 items. Thank you.
Right. Assuming we all remember the fire instructions from the beginning of the meeting, shall we whip straight on? I intend to rule with an iron fist from the chair for the rest of the meeting. So, you know, keep everything brief and to the point. And without further ado, let us move on to item 9, road closures update. But before that, we have a speaker who will address you, Mr. Graham Harrison. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed at the last meeting, Mr. Saul raised the point under any other business, and I thought there were several items that I would like to speak about. Hopefully, Stagecoach, Regent Coaches and Flamenco could all be invited, but as none of them are here at the moment, I should just raise one point. Many members will know over the Easter holidays, Blean was closed for 2 or 3 weeks. Buses from here went University, Rough Common, Brenley, Thanet Way. But then the Stagecoach were told the Thanet Way's closed. So for several nights, if you wanted to go from the University to Whitstable, you've got to get a bus from the University to the bus station, and then a Whitstable bus from the bus station via Surrey, Herne Bay to Whitstable. Now, I don't know whether Thanet Way is Environment Agency or Highway Agency or KCC. If it's KCC, could Thanet Way and Blean be adjusted so it's not at the same time? And if it's a Highways Agency, is there any discussion between Highways Agency and KCC? And then we discovered it was closed several nights. The next night, the buses were diverted and they discovered the Thanet Way was open. But nobody had told Stagecoach that the work had been finished the night before. So there's something wrong in the system somewhere. And well, since it's not, I've got a bit more time. One of the other items I was going to mention, and it's a pity your railway people are not here now, when the railway crossing was going to be closed for roadworks from 8 o'clock, and we heard it was closed at 7 o'clock one night. The following night I was out here at 7:15. The bus came along as instructed. No, road was closed. And I said to the workman, why is it you workmen always tell the bus company one thing and do something different? Portsmouth Station Road open now. The bus could use Station Road West Extension and go round that way. But if the instructions are to be closed at 8 o'clock, why are they closing at 7 o'clock? But I'll leave it at that for the moment. If you do have a meeting subsequently with the other people, then I'll make some other comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I know these are issues that are felt strongly by a lot of bus users in the district as well, and I know that we do have some plans to have Stagecoach at future meetings as well, so I'll look forward to hearing from you then. I believe we will be having an introduction to the body of the report from our esteemed Cabinet member, Mr. Neil Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it will be me tonight for this one. If I could just start by saying to Mr. Harrison, I do appreciate there were a lot of issues at that point. The Thanet Way is, unfortunately, owned and maintained by Kent County Council. I wish it was Highways England, but it is. There have been a few problems there, as people will be aware, and there was that period where both the Blean Road and the Thanet Way were closed. I'll go on to some of the issues with emergency work and unforeseen circumstances. That was very much unforeseen. What also does happen at times is when the A2 work maintenance or has a closure, the A2, of course, is a national highways road. So although it looks very similar to the Thanet Way, it's not a KCC road. Coordination isn't always as good between those bodies as it can be. In terms of work starting before it should start, I just would observe that permit systems do exist for a reason. If work happens outside of permits, fines can be levied. Unfortunately, fines have not been raised for a number of years, and sometimes it is cheaper for utility companies or whoever to not meet the conditions of a permit and pay the fine than actually meet the conditions of a permit, but I'll touch on that in a moment. Road closures, I think of all the many issues I'd love to be able to solve on roads, the impact of roadworks and streetworks, it's one of the trickiest. Because if you compare it to road maintenance issues, potholes, so on, that's really down to a lack of adequate funding over an extended period. If you had the money, you'd be able to do more than just patch the cracks, almost literally. Now, one of the problems we have is that it's understandable. Residents, they see the roads closed, they see traffic lights, traffic cones, and they assume that Kent County Council, as a highways authority, has full control over what's happening. The reality is far from that, and I do often remark, part in jest but part not, that if KCC had 10% of the power the public think we have, we'd still have about twice the amount of power we actually do. Now, in terms of legislation, there's really two main pieces. On one hand, you've got the Highways Act 1980 about many things, but about keeping vehicles flowing. Then you've also got the New Roads and Streetworks Act 1991, which give utility companies an almost explicit right to access their assets, to maintain, to inspect, as and when. Now, just on some of the questions here, we've got the report in front, and this was a report that was tabled at Kent County Council's Environment and Transport Cabinet Committee recently, just showing we actually are aware of the concerns and how we are going through with our new group of streetworks inspectors to try and check that permits are being adhered to as we wish. There's mention there that at the time there were 4 employed, 3 fully up to speed. I would stress it doesn't mean we just have 4 people across all of Kent looking at these permits and looking at the streetworks. There's an entire team of other people, up to and including the highways manager herself, who will be doing this, and the stewards. But these are 4 people specifically looking at those works. They don't differentiate between checking on works of utility companies and Kent Highways contractors. I think that's important to note, as is borne out in some of the statistics shown within the report. They will go into it almost blind and make sure that the sites are safe and worked as they should be, whoever is running them. Now, some of the questions we get asked include, why is there a full road closure? Why can't you operate under lights? Why can't it just be a small part of the road taken out? Of course, it will always consider using options, be it directional road closures, different traffic management schemes. Sometimes it just isn't actually possible due to the nature of the works. You do need that full closure. Some of the utilities, of course, are such that you do need that clearance around the site. It's not just a case of digging down. The only danger is what's immediately beneath. And also, I would say that sometimes actually a full closure can, it's counterintuitive, I'll give up, as counterlogical as it may seem, a full closure can be less impactful in that you can get a lot more work done under a full closure than under lights. So you may be looking at a reduced number of days for any traffic management on site compared to. As the report makes clear as well, the other issue that we touch upon quite often are diversion routes. Diversion routes, particularly in the modern age, can be incredibly tricky because the streetworks coordinators, they will sit down, they will work out with the utility companies what the official diversion route is going to be. I should say the utility company will come up with their own diversion routes and it will be checked that it is suitable. But of course, people these days don't necessarily follow road signs, and if their phone on Google Maps says that they can go down the road next to them, they'll go down the road next to them. This can mean that various unsuitable roads get used. I think one of the best examples of this in recent memory was when we had the rebuild work on New Thanet Way, and there were various vehicles of all types going through Yorklets and everywhere else because that was literally where the phones were telling them. And even worse than that, and this is something I do have great sympathy with the residents for, it's when it is HGVs doing this. Because, of course, rather than relying on HGV-specific sat-nav equipment, they are again using Google Maps on a phone, which is saying that you might be able to fit your family car down there, but that's a little bit different than a large multi-axled lorry. Unfortunately, Kent County Council do not have enforcement powers against drivers who don't go down these routes. It's something that Kent Police do look at. It's very difficult because at the end of the day, the roads are there unless there are specific restrictions, and even some of those restrictions are difficult to enforce. They are there to be driven on. It is something that we constantly reflect upon. It's something we do try and engage with the providers of the third-party sat-nav technology over, because increasingly road signs just don't actually make much of a difference. Now, another question will always be, how can I find out about the roadworks that are going on? The best way for that actually is by using the One Network online. What I would recommend to colleagues here is actually, if you sign up, you can choose a specific area that you want to know about all upcoming roadworks, and as soon as those works appear, you'll get an email at a frequency of your choice. I get them for the Canterbury district on a daily basis. They turn up about 4 in the morning. That can be incredibly useful. However, that doesn't get away from the fact that sometimes closures will happen and the residents will know the road's just been closed because it's being dug up, and they will know before Kent County Council. Because up to about 35% of all utility roadworks in this county are done under an emergency process. That means they can go in and close the road, start digging, and they only have to inform the Highways Authority within 2 working hours. And of course, working hours I stress upon, because if they start doing it at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, they haven't actually got to tell the Highways Authority until about 10 o'clock on the Monday morning, which can create all sorts of problems. It can also mean they can get in, cause the problems, and be back out before they've actually even notified us anything was happening. So as many of you who sign up to these emails will see, sometimes you'll know there's a road closure, you may have got stuck in it, and then 2 days later you'll get an email saying, oh, there has to be a road closure, and it's backdated by 2 days. That's what that's all about. This is something we're increasingly lobbying the government over, and as are other highways authorities in the country, because while we accept there will always be emergencies, things do happen. The definition isn't set by us. It is self-described and self-determined by the utility company. So while I and you may think, you know, an arcing power line across the road, clearly an emergency, a geyser of water shooting 50 feet up in the air, clearly an emergency, I think we all have experiences of certain utilities who have nice maps on their websites knowing where, careful how I phrase this, where they have utilities that aren't working properly for several years. They will finally get to repair them and do it under an emergency process rather than having to plan. And that may, of course, as has happened in Herne Bay a while back, they decide to do an emergency access of their utility in the middle of a formal diversion route for planned works. And this helps absolutely nobody. What we really need there, frankly, is a change to the national legislation. But as the report shows, we've got people out there seeing that these permits are being adhered to. Now, I wouldn't want to worry people too much by the fact that there are quite a few that are not meeting their permit. Some of those are actually as simple as the sign that says what the job is, who the company is, and what the permit number is missing. That'll be down as a permit failure, because increasingly that is something that's important. We say to people, if actually it's Southern Water, SGN, whoever, the name should always be on that board with a contact detail. You, the resident, should be able to contact them directly. So that is crucial. In terms of how much influence we actually have, we do get the people out there. Like I say, they are inspected ad hoc. We also have the reactive ability to send people out if we think there are problems. I'm not the expert, but sometimes I drive through roadworks and clearly there are issues, and by and large I'll get somebody at some level out there to look at them. It can be daft stuff such as traffic light phasing being wrong, so you're suddenly driving through on a green light and before you know it, cars are coming the other way because they've not set it up properly. Going back to the point I made at the start, quite often we will set the permit condition so that in peak times, or indeed all of the time, but normally in peak times, the traffic signals have to be manually staffed. So instead of just having 2 minutes that way, 2 minutes that way, it depends on the weight of the traffic. Unfortunately, because the permit fines associated with them haven't been uplifted for many years, it's actually cheaper to pay the fine for not doing that than it is to employ someone to have someone on the lights, which of course is one of those huge frustrations. And while talking about frustrations, while there are lots of fines given out, and even though the money isn't huge, it is there, of course, because the way the Kent County Council operates, that money isn't actually ring-fenced or even spent within the Highways Department, so it just goes back into the general pot. And I'm sure most residents would prefer if utility companies, or indeed highways themselves, who are causing these impacts and breaking the rules, are fined, it should be spent on things involving roads and transport. That's something I'll continue to lobby for. But there we go. That's what the report's here for. We genuinely share your frustrations. 99% of people working for Kent Highways live in Kent. They get stuck in the same traffic. They see it day in, day out. I've got my Deputy Cabinet Member, David Roby, has been working closely with senior officers and other councils to try and put together a package and with Transport for the South East, so we can actively and strongly lobby central government to actually get these rules sorted out. So actually the Highways Authority has the level of authority over the highways that people think we already do, and frankly what we should do. So I hope that's a little bit of a tour of that, and I'll try and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I think a very timely and much needed update. It's a mystery to a lot of people how these things happen, and I think it's really useful that these notes stand there, and thank you for coming to explain it. Go Naomi, or Paul, then Naomi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your report. And it is good to know that you want to lobby central government about changes that need to be made. I think the issue that you raise around larger vehicles, I think where we do see one of the biggest problems is around larger vehicles, because private vehicles, the private cars, can find alternative routes, like you say, either via sign diversions or via Google Maps or whatever sat nav they happen to have. One of the frustrations we found is when, for example, there were plans to close Littlebourne Road not so long ago for the works linking up utilities connections to the old Howe Barracks site. Is there just weren't any proper bus diversions in place. And of course, when we talk about bus diversions, we're talking about people who are reliant on public transport. They don't have an alternative, and no proper routes for buses to take, no realistic routes for buses to take that don't involve really ridiculous diversions, and in fact increase the cost of running those bus services for the bus companies. And of course, while we all might have views on how bus services should be run and how they should be regulated, it's not good for any bus provider to be losing money on what their core business is. So obviously, you think about buses, you're also thinking about HGVs as well, because the routes that buses take, obviously, you'll be sending HGVs down similar routes. So is coming to a question really is like, does anything such as like proper diversionary maps exist? For example, if you know you're going to have to close a really core route, are there KCC held maps that exist that say these routes are okay, these routes are usable, rather than just leaving it up to the contractors, the utility companies, telecommunications companies, whatever they happen to be? How much control does KCC have over those diversionary routes? That's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I think the Littlebourne Road example is a pretty key one of almost the whole system at play, because that really went to the brink. In terms of the diversion routes, yes, I mean, while it would be for the utility companies to arrange their diversion route, it has to be an appropriate diversion route. And of course, different people might define that in a different way, but KCC do have the knowledge. I don't just mean people sat in an office, I mean the actual, the data there of what is appropriate and what's not. Because of course, with the coordinators, they do need to know. I mean, if you were to go onto the one network and look at the roadworks for the next 6 months or so and actually lie them all over the top of each other, it is just a staggering number. With the Littlebourne Road, I know Mel, Mike Soul and others were, to the last minute, we were working on that to try and fix buses because it was, the worst possible time of year. That goes back to if the utility company, I've got to be careful, I suppose, but if a utility company or a developer who's putting in new connections say that we need a full road closure for a certain period, and that's taken as that they do, somewhere like that road and that location, there's pretty much only one time of the year you could possibly have a full closure, and even then it was going to be hugely impactful. It was, you know, the best time of year to do it, but there's not actually any good times, if that makes sense. Ideally, but that was that. Of course, they came back, they wanted to change the dates, and that was when the permit was pulled. And of course, the risk they've got now from, you know, not much sympathy, but the problem is now, if we work on the assumption that they can't change the size of the closure they need or the scale, and it always has to be that time of year, then you'd be thinking, oh, will it be the same time next year? Or actually, has that road space already been booked by something else that will be impacted? If so, then no, they can't do it that year, and then it's the year after, and that's the issue. So I think the last, I'm aware of this, they've gone back to look to see if it could be done under a smaller arrangement, but that's the extreme end of things. But I think with buses, you're absolutely right, because the thing that brought that most to the forefront was that it was going to impact school bus journeys right at the start of the school term. And for me, Mel, Mike, and actually everyone who was talking about this, going to secondary school is stressful for any kid these days. But we want the kids to have a good start at secondary school and actually to get used to getting on buses, because that'll do well for them going forward. If their first day at school means they either can't use the bus or they get stuck in traffic for 2 hours, they're late, the teacher moans at them, they're going to associate buses with bad news from day one. And the mental duress that's going to put them under at school, but then actually the impact on their choice of public transport going forward. So actually, I'm glad that that didn't happen. But I do think that buses always have to be in the forefront, which also picks up on Mr. Harrison's point. Sometimes roadworks will end early, sometimes they'll overrun. It is important that, well, here, Stagecoach are always fully aware of that, because you don't want to send them down roads and then the bus gets stuck and then people are stranded on it, as we do see happen sometimes with these emergency works and people in 30 degrees heat halfway between Canterbury and Herne Bay. So yeah, fully agree with you. But yeah, we will look at buses and HGVs together. Sometimes there will be routes signposted not suitable for HGVs, for all good that does, but yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I've got Councillor Smith, Mr. Dance, then Councillor Buckman. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Baker, thank you for this. And you were very, I mean, we've all had quite, you know, drastic road closures, I'm sure, and certainly Mr. Dance and Mr. Baker and myself are very aware of what happened with Blean and Thanet Way, and caused considerable concern and worry and damage to people. With the road diversions, particularly with the Thanet Way, can we look at maybe lobby, and what can we as a city council do to help KCC look at, if you've got a diversion, it says follow the black circle or follow the black triangle if you're, you know, to get back onto the route, and that is compulsory for vehicles over a certain size, possibly could be a solution, so that people who are using their phone, instead of paying 400 quid for a proper, you know, sat nav for larger vehicles. And then, you know, the other thing is recently we had Church Lane closed in Sea Salter for a considerable time. I knew those works were happening on the 9th of September. I knew they were starting on the 9th of September for 5 or 6 weeks. It was an emergency closure. You know, it's really frustrating. And they did go over, and it's clashed a bit with the new development. But I mean, it's fine. Actually, people who live on Church Lane love it being closed. And the leak has stopped. So if anybody knows Church Lane, there has been a leak there forever, and it's no longer currently there.
Yeah, I mean, South East Water, bless them, they do have that lovely map on their website showing all of the leaks, and some are there for quite some time, and it does always seem to be, when they eventually get around to doing it, it's under that process. But sometimes it's almost a case of, well, you've got the leak done. In terms of diversion routes that you may know, I mean, if you look at the motorways, obviously they're national highways, but you have that system, don't you, where you have the triangles, the dots, the squares, so people know to follow them. And I think the Thanet Way is a pretty good example where you could actually almost install such a system. But of course, as we've seen, you know, the new Thanet Way was built because the old Thanet Way couldn't take the traffic. The old Thanet Way has changed massively since the new Thanet Way was built. It used to almost be a town bypass. Now it's an intra-urban corridor. So getting the traffic across there is just poor. But it is almost that, isn't it? It's almost bumping up the enforceability, I think, for lack of a better word, of some of those things, because it actually is crazy when you see and when we saw some of those HGVs in people's gardens, pretty much, knocking out hedges and all of this, and you're thinking, what do you, yeah, and when you've got roads that are, almost bridleways and it's, I think something clearly does need doing there. I would just say, finally, on this point, the previous roads minister, Guy Opperman, I met up with him prior to the general election, obviously, and we had a chat about the use of emergency process. So, oh yeah, I've heard they do use it every now and then, don't they? I thought, well, in Kent, it's up to 35% of the work. And he was staggered, and we actually were in the depot, and we showed the list of, and you can't. I had an MP this week passing on the concerns of a constituency, not one in this local area. And the constituent wasn't happy because we don't give enough advance notice of emergency road closures. So, well, that's that we wish we could. Then we could plan them. Then you could start moving things around. But there we go.
Mr. Dunce. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's driver and public perception. Where you have a town or a settlement with a railway line running through it, there are only so many bridges and there's only so many tunnels. And what happens is you end up with a road closed notice 2 or 3 miles away, because that's your nearest entry point to a potential issue. That is 2 or 3 miles away. You're looking for what road is closed after you read that sign. So that bit of psyche doesn't match. Another one is, I don't know whether everyone in this room understands, where you have a major excavation and they put the new tarmac back in, you've got to wait for a cure time. And if you don't, you will end up with issues where I live, where we had a beautiful road built with 106 monies. There are further developments down the lane, and they put a gas pipe in, and they've bored under the road, but they need inspection holes every 50 metres, 80 metres. Completely messed up our brand new 106 road. They didn't wait for the cure, and again, everything's sunk. Because it's a construction site, you have the heavy lorries. So you need to impose those road closures, but the public don't really understand that. And it's the issues I get. The biggest issue I get is Whitstable High Street, C Street. Gas company went in without mitigating a diversion, and we had buses doing 3-point turns in the high street. And it was actually the traders that got the guy on site to phone me, and I phoned his boss, and luckily got it cancelled that day but it was under the guise of an emergency, but it wasn't. Someone used a plastic pipe to put their gas through instead of another sort, because it was on a highway. So it was almost like a catch-up job. So where is the truth? Where is the lie? And that is where Derek Roby is, who is the debt to Neil, trying to get to the bottom of. So there, 80% of the issues I get as a county councillor in that locality is around highways. But on a final note, as more houses go in, the infrastructure starts to creak. They upped the pressure in Whitstable and blew all 4 corners of the town. Every single road, there was one road left, and that had gas issues. Every single inroad blew because they turned the pressure up because of more housing in that area. Now, to think about redoing that infrastructure doesn't even bear thinking about the road closures, the length of road closures. So we're in a bit of a cleft stick with all of this. So it's good to say that is my understanding of the issues I see. And I know Neil and Derek are working very hard to come to resolve some of this. Thank you.
Councillor Buckman.
Sorry, if, if I may, Chair, the point that Mrs. Arndt makes about development, I think really we're currently in a perfect storm with roadworks and utility works because of we have an ageing utility network, as we know, within an ageing road network. We have a drive, understandably, for better connectivity, which is all the broadband going in, and then the housing development with everything else going in, combined with some things such as 1999 was when there was the tragic gas mains explosion up north. And the health and safety executive said you've got to change all your mains. Now, of course, in the years since then, all the easy ones have been done. But now we're in a situation where the really complex ones that close, like routes from Faversham to Ashford, are having to be done because they're under instruction to do it. But I think that's absolutely right. And in terms of, you know, why has the road been closed like that? Why isn't it done like that? Why can't it be done like that? And things like curing that Mark's mentioned is fair. If anyone really struggles to sleep at night, I'd recommend Googling the Safety at Streetworks and Roadworks Red Book. It's a 108-page document. And I always refer to it as the book that explains why road closures are not logical. But it explains the exact space you need around what sort of utilities works can be done next to each other and which ones can't. You know, you can't do water and gas and electric next to each other, etc., etc. There's always a reason. It just seems a little bit bizarre at times.
Very well. Councillor Buckman, I think we'll make this the last one on this one, if that's okay.
That's more than okay. What was I going to say? Sorry. Yeah, I think, Karen, what Naomi was saying about sort of trying to write off to people about sort of weight limits on residential roads or with like 2-axle vehicles, and then push for that sort of last mile delivery in smaller vehicles as well would certainly help. But as you know, during the wind sheet when the gas works were going on in the high street and the thing was shut, I had quite a few conversations with SGN and Hazel Waters about diversion. So I learned quite a lot that, you know, they're not enforceable. You know, fibre optic companies can come in, dig up, and the next fibre optic company can come in and dig up the same bit of road again. And you have like an inspector to check the finished surface at the end, so everything's okay. But what might help is if it was on your website rather than just a report a problem bit, is it had a list of actually things like that saying, you know, length of permit, you know, it's not the length of their working hours, for instance. You know, I'll see the road shut and no one's there. You know, just things like that, so a resident could actually see it without actually having to contact somebody. And then I actually have a question locally about St Thomas's Hill. So opposite the Kent Uni, that's been going on for years, it seems. You know, the pavement will be shut, then there'll be traffic lights, then the pavement will get repaired, then it will get traffic lights, and it'll be dug up again. And I think at the moment, I think a couple of weeks ago there's traffic lights, but there's not now. It's just the pavement that's dug up again. So I was just wondering what's going on there, really, and why.
I won't give you an answer immediately, but I have got one I can pop you an email for about the St Thomas's Hill one. So yeah, it won't be a good answer, but it will at least be an explanation. But no, I just want to say thank you everyone for tonight. I mean, this is useful. We are going around talking about this because I think we all know this is one of the great frustrations, and as Dane's just said there, getting more information readily available can be helpful, I think, because it is frustrating when, you know, it's closed, you're stuck in traffic, it's causing you a nuisance, but nobody seems to be working. Now, there might be a valid reason for that. It might be curing, and it might frankly be because, you know, it's a pretty skilled job to work on a live gas main, and there might be a genuine emergency down the road they've had to go to. It's all this sort of things that it could be. But yeah, I mean, we wouldn't get on top of it. And I would just say that David Roby and his work, one of the things we're looking at doing is actually compiling an evidence base for the actual economic impact on Kent of all of these roadworks. Because obviously when you start talking to national figures, that's something they need to see. It's a difficult quantum to get to, but it's quite right. Final thought would be, though, while I would love to see, you know, more weekend working, longer hours, this and that, I suppose one, we will pay for our utilities, so we'd end up paying for that if they had to pay more. There are a limited number of people to do the jobs. And going back to what I said at the start, we wouldn't be able to ask utilities to do anything more than we'd be prepared to do ourselves. And my fear would be, given how budgets work, I wouldn't want to be in a situation where we get even less road maintenance done because we're having to do it over extended periods. It's always a huge balance, but I think we're going to get there, because I do actually think at the moment that economic impact, the general frustration, and the fact that congestion in Kent as a whole, due to the uncertainty of when roads will be open and when they won't be, is throttling economic development. So I think there's lots to be said for that. But anyway, thanks a lot for tonight. Been helpful, and I will feed back to my colleague about some of the comments that have been made.
Thank you very much, Neil. And this is simply to note, but I think I'd also like to propose that we offer a by hand vote of thanks to Neil for coming to giving us a detailed report and answering those questions. It really is appreciated. And I know we've spoken about how JTBs work across Kent, and you've been very open and honest on how that. And I think this is a great forum for that kind of thing. And thank you for supporting this JTB in particular with it. So, thank you. We're having is that the first ever round of applause at a JTB? I don't know. So thank you very much to Richard Shelton, who's been waiting very patiently through all of this before we do the report. And I will pass straight over to you for an update on the Sturry bypass.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Richard Shelton. Excuse me. I'm a project manager responsible for delivering of the Sturry Link Road. Now is a good time to give you an update on the project. We're making good progress with regard to having a contractor appointed, a design and build contractor appointed. So the detailed design process is being undertaken by the contractor. And we've also recently gone through the compulsory purchase public inquiry. So we're making good progress on that. Just to give a little bit of an update, the Sturry Link Road itself is a short section of road that runs between the A28 Sturry Road and A291 Sturry Hill, and includes a new viaduct over the Great River Stour. Then the railway has also connection to Shallock Road. And once the Sturry Link Road itself is completed, we're proposing to do some alterations to the existing A28, A291 junction, very close to the Sturry crossing. And it was interesting to hear that Network Rail are now looking at potentially extending the platforms that will provide some additional resilience to our proposals, but will not go to the levels of providing the traffic capacity that is required for the development and the existing congestion that we get. The KCC section of the Sturry Link Road is to provide a new roundabout on the A28. There's a new cycleway being provided on the A28 to get past the traffic, past the roundabout. And then there's a 750 metre stretch of road that will travel north across the viaduct, the floodplain, the Great Stour and the railway crossing before it gets to a part of the development that will be built by the developer of the Sturry site. I'll come on to that in a moment. The viaduct itself is a single-way carriageway, one in each direction, but does include a additional dedicated bus lane for the southbound buses. So there is a bus provision within the scheme. And there is a shared unsegregated footway cycleway to the east of the new carriageway as well. So all road users are catered for within the scheme. Just really, so that sets out what the scheme looks like. And I know that there are plans in the report if you need to get that in a little bit more detail. Just really giving a project status and a project update. The project had approval from the Environment Transport Committee initially in May 2018, and that was reinforced when we went back to committee in July 2023. Planning consent was granted in September 2021 and remains valid until September 2026. Again, appendices provided within the report show the layout of that road. As I suggested earlier, we've gone out to tender and we've awarded a contract to Volker Fitzpatrick. That was awarded February of this year. And the contractor has been working for the last 6 months in developing the detailed design and putting together the package that will need to go back to the planners to discharge planning conditions, etc. The Land Assembly, we've been working over the last few years to negotiate the land by voluntary agreement. Unfortunately, it was pretty clear that no matter how much you try and deal with voluntary agreements and voluntary purchases, it's not always something that people are prepared to accept. So we had published a CPO, compulsory purchase order. We had initially 5 objections to that from various organisations and 1 landowner. Over the period of the compulsory purchase, we managed to negotiate away 4 of the objectors. We just ended up with one landowner finally going through. So the public inquiry was held, and that was held on the 2nd and 3rd of October in this very building. The public inquiry is obviously closed, and the inspector is providing his report to the Secretary of State. We will be expecting a decision from the Secretary of State for Transport on the 19th of February. They are advising that 80% of their decisions are made by that date. They're recommending that, or suggesting that they'll make 100% of their decisions by another 4 weeks later. So around about February, March, we will get a decision from the Secretary of State as to whether the CPO has been confirmed or not. There will be follow-up procedures to deal with regard to the compulsory purchase, but once it's confirmed, we'll at least know we've got the land available to deliver the scheme. As I suggested, KCC are delivering the southern section, the section that goes across the river and the railway, specifically because of the agreements required with the Network Rail Authority. The remainder of the Sturry Link Road is all being delivered by the developer of the Sturry site, and that has got planning consent. It got planning consent through an application to Canterbury planners. I think they got their planning consent in, again, yes, March 2021. They have, to keep their planning consent live, they've been submitting reserve matters. Their applications were submitted and approved in April and May this year. So the land at Sturry site has been having challenges, specifically with resolving issues with regard to nutrient neutrality, but it is continuing to keep the application live and making progress towards being out on site. I suppose that's where one of the big challenges has been, because they are not coming forward quite as quickly as we like, and we don't want to be building a viaduct to nowhere. We have had a look at what the programme is and how that affects the delivery of the whole of the link road and what KCC can deliver. So we have adjusted the programme now. We were originally reporting that we were going to start in April 2025. We've had to delay that start till April 2026 to enable the Sturry site to start getting on site and to commit to delivering the internal road and its development. And we're working with the planners and the planners at Canterbury and with the developers to make sure that their site comes forward and help them to unlock their issues that they may be having. Once the link road is open, we would then be going and having a look at the A28, A291 junction. But again, that would be a bit later on in the process. So just a quick update on programme. We are continuing with the detailed design and discharging of planning conditions. That will run through till March next year. We have, because of the delay and in order to discharge and keep on top of our environmental surveys, we will be continuing to undertake environmental surveys and develop the mitigation strategy, and that will be continuing across this winter and the summer and reporting to the planning committee to discharge our pre-commencement planning conditions and get any necessary licenses in place before commencement. We've also got, we've been undertaking a scheme of archaeological investigation. That was original trial trenches. Good news or bad news is that there was a significant amount of archaeology identified in these trial trenches. So we've now got a larger scheme of works to undertake before we can commence any works. And that will effectively be to strip and search the site that is effectively between the A28 and the river, and between Perryfield Farm and the Viking car showrooms or the Southern Water area. So we'll need to wait until we can get in and do our clearance early in the spring next year to do that. Within the report, I have done a full funding model for the project. I don't intend to go through that here today, but all the funding is in place, or the model is in place. There are some challenges in bringing forward some of those Section 106 monies, which we will continue to talk to the developers and monitor that. Because of that risk, Kent have made a commitment, or we've made a commitment that we'll go back to the ETCC prior to commencement of the construction element of the design and build contract. We have a break clause in the contract, so should it be deemed that we haven't got sufficient funding coming in from the Section 106s to actually deliver that, and KCC at risk, then obviously that decision can be made there. But in the meantime, we continue to look at all the Section 106s that are coming in and any other funding stream to ensure that if there are any loopholes or shortfalls, they are covered off before we go back to committee and commit to the construction phase. So effectively now, the key milestones are going to be to follow the compulsory purchase order processes, to progress the detailed design, discharge planning consents and conditions, and seek approvals from Network Rail and the highway asset managers, the ongoing archaeology work, the environmental and ecology surveys, and advanced environmental mitigation. We'll continue to seek the updates from the developers and collecting the Section 106 contributions, and we'll be undertaking the financial review prior to committing to the construction phase. So I think that really covers a very quick update on where we are and an overview of the report that I've put together. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that report. And I'm sorry that Kent Online stole your thunder slightly earlier today. But that given, we have Mr. Dance.
Yeah, this is going to get a bit tetchy, I think. There's a lot of 106 money here. Has any of this been siphoned off already by the City Council as SIL money? Yes or no?
Not to my knowledge.
Excellent, thank you.
Follow that, Mr. Baker first. I was just going to say, and Richard, thank you for coming along and giving this update. And I think it's understandable when people see delays and obviously the differential between the amount we need in 106 and the amount currently received, that people will get nervous about these things. But I just would say, I hope it might make people less nervous, but I doubt it will. Having such break clauses, having things looked at again, keeping a very close eye on everything throughout the process, it is not anything out of the usual. It's what we're having to do with these capital schemes, you know. KCC are not in the position to forward fund a lot and then just hope that the money comes in to pay themselves back. That's not the world we're in anymore. I think we've still got a pretty comprehensive financial model there. Yes, it relies on developments coming forward, getting permission and the money coming forward, but actually, following on from conversations we had earlier about, we all know the problems in that area of Sturry. We've heard about the rail station, and if we are to get more people on the bus from the Herne Bay corridor into Canterbury, removing that snarl up will be one of the key bonuses of it. So, I mean, I'm confident that everything is in place to get this delivered, and I look forward to the next steps happening.
Councillor Bothwell, then Councillor Smith, then Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a question about the road layout, the design of the road layout with respect to active travel. I can see that there are cycleways and shared cycle footpaths, etc. And I'm just wondering about the detailed design of that, and whether models of active travel from the best examples have been examined. So, for example, looking at the way road layouts are done in the Netherlands and perhaps the Nordic countries, where there's a much higher level of cycling and active travel, which obviously is a city council policy and which we want to encourage here. So, for example, the roads have quite slow bends, which encourages the cars to travel fast, and whether there should be changes to the layout to discourage cars from driving fast. The cycleways, which I think are the purple ones, if you're travelling west from Surrey towards Canterbury along the new road and you come to the roundabout on the north side of the railway and you want to turn right, I can't see how you would do that, travelling along that particular route. So I'm thinking that cyclists might be encouraged to actually cycle on the road rather than on the cycle paths because it's actually easier to move around. Similarly, the cycle paths stop at each junction off that main road, going east to west. So that's another discouragement for cyclists to actually use the cycleways. It seems to be designed around the car rather than around pedestrians and cyclists. And I think in the future we should be designing roads and footpaths and cycleways with pedestrians and cyclists given priority, absolute priority, and thinking of motor vehicles second. Thank you.
Certainly, there are footpaths, there are cycleways on both sides of the new link road. We've got a controlled pedestrian crossing and toucan crossing on the roundabout just off the A28. I take your point. I'm a cyclist myself, and there is never a good route for cyclists. Whether you get the confident cyclists or the nervous cyclists, they all want to be in a slightly different place. The challenge is trying to fit within the system that we've got. Certainly the section of the Surrey Link Road that Kent are delivering, it's between those two roundabouts and across the viaduct. There is full provision on one side of the viaduct there, such that pedestrians and cyclists all get to get across the viaduct. The section that's all being delivered by the developer has been through the process through Canterbury. And again, we know that there are footpath links and cycleway links along the whole of their length. How they deal with it, where they get to each of the junctions, I'm not too sure. I can't particularly answer that one. But you're into the residential areas at those particular points. But I take your point that, yeah, we need to try and be more active for cyclists. The challenge we have in the UK is the amount of space we've got to deliver these things. And it's not always as easy as it looks. But that within the Surrey Link Road, there have been significant allowances for cyclists and pedestrians.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, funnily enough, I was talking to a chap in Herne Bay this morning about this. He said, "Oh, can't wait for this. So, not being stuck on the Surrey crossing forever." He says, "I think I've spent half my life there." I was a little bit concerned about the footpath, the CB64 Pro, but it looks like there's plenty of room for that under the viaduct. This is the footpath that runs parallel to the bridge, but it looks like that's okay. What I can see is that this will bring people quicker and closer to the Surrey Park and Ride. And if we, as we sort of are increasing our parking charges in the centre of town and reducing parking places in the centre of town, people will be encouraged to use the Park and Ride more. And this is all a good success, I can see. Thank you.
Chair, if I may on that point, Richard mentioned about how we look at all forms of funding that we can to get this delivered. And of course, the fact that this would help people access public transport like that, it is something that is being discussed about whether we could apply to any new bus funding that may appear in this budget or indeed a subsequent one, because I think you're absolutely right. It would get people to Park and Ride easier, because one of the reasons I would suggest that people don't use Surrey Road Park and Ride coming from Herne Bay as much as we'd like them to is because they know they're going to get caught up in that traffic.
Thank you. I can't possibly add to that. Anything that's good news for the Surrey Road Park and Ride is good news as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Prentice, then Councillor Buckman, and I think we'll draw this on to a clerk. Go on, Councillor Stockley as the final pièce de résistance. Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. Few points. I think Councillor Smith's already made my point about better access to Story Road Park and Ride, and so this is a wonderful opportunity to increase that access. And I raised it in a recent scrutiny committee. The one particular point I made in that committee, and I'm going to raise again here, maybe we can find a pot of funding for it, is some sort of signage that, whether that's digital or more traditional signage, that encourages people very directly to use Story Road Park and Ride, because we know it's the one that is less, patronised at the moment. So if the message comes across loud and clear for motorists coming in on the viaduct on the new link road that Story Road Park and Ride is open, it's £4 a day, £3.20 for residents, that would be really great to see. The other point was about cycling, and if I've missed it, sorry, because it's been quite a long day. Is the cycling two-way on the viaduct? Is that two-way cycling? Yeah, so I thought it must be. It's just the way it's illustrated in the plan, and I wanted to clarify that. And obviously, the other point I'd make, I suppose, is that with the old bit of the Story road through the village, then not being the main road anymore, then that does create a quieter cycling and walking route. So maybe there are opportunities in the future to improve that road purely for quieter traffic, for walking, cycling, buses. But, overall, fantastic scheme. I'm disappointed it's taking longer, but it's great to see. Thank you.
Just quickly coming back on your last point. Yes, my colleagues in the transportation team have been collecting additional monies, and there are currently Section 106 monies set aside from, I can't remember exactly which of the developments it is, but for the very benefit of trying to calm the village of Story, maybe provide some additional parking, to do various little bits and pieces in there. We don't have a scheme yet. We are currently looking at a scheme, and we'll start to come forward with some consultation points on that particular element in the near future.
Lovely. Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was just looking at the section near Story Station. So obviously where you turn left to go up towards the viaduct, and then you turn right to the viaduct and left to the Story crossing. That section there, is there any plans to stop the queues going up? Is it Island Road all the way along there? Because when the barriers are down, the lanes are single traffic, so you're still going to be in a queue to turn right to go up towards the viaduct. And following on from that, and the presentation earlier today about the railways, was there any appetite, was any conversations ever gone on about sort of combining the two as such, or trying to work, lengthening the platform and trying this at the same time? And was there anything else I was going to say? No, I don't think so. Oh yes, sorry. Have you got like is there like a trigger figure or a trigger percentage of SOS 106 money that's come in that then you can start, or do you have to wait, or do you wait? Do you have to have 90% of it before you start building? Because Avignon's quite a nice unfinished bridge. People come to that, so maybe.
Taking each of those. Certainly, Island Road and Story Station. Yes, we're aware of the congestion we've got there. The original scheme actually banned the left turn movement across the crossing, but through consultation process, that was rejected through planning. And so we've had to come up, or we did revise the scheme such that a left turn manoeuvre is available. But that A28, A291 junction is going to be reconfigured once the link road is open to encourage through traffic, effectively going up Story Hill. With the comment regarding the level crossing and the platforms, it's something that's been shared with me on a regular basis about that's all that we need. Well, no, the level, the improvements to the level, to the platform lengths doesn't actually save your traffic congestion that you've got there, but it's got to be very, very welcomed. And I'd hate to be, honestly, that's the first I'd heard of it tonight, is the lengthening of the crossing of the platforms. We've been talking to Nina and the rest of the Network Rail for a significant period of time, and we've got specific officers within Kent that do Network Rail communications on a regular basis, and we've asked this particular question of them about how it can happen, and it's always been something that they've not been able to give us any positive news on. So that was new to me tonight, as well as it was possibly to yourselves as well. I don't know how early that they'd shared some of that with you. And with regard to the trigger position for the Section 106s, we currently have 10.6 already received and banked towards the project. KCC has currently allowed itself to incorporate a potential forward funding package that is going to be part of the review that we'll do again before we commit to the construction. But there is a forward funding mechanism that has been discussed within the authority and has sort of been accepted today, but who knows where we'll be in 12 months' time with changes.
Thank you, Richard. And Councillor Stockley. One more from Councillor Bothwell, then we all need to go home at some point.
Thank you very much. Just quickly then, I think you said that over the viaduct there's a bus lane, but southbound only towards the city. If that's the case, can I ask, please, why is there just the one bus lane? And what routing will the bus out northbound towards Herne Bay take in that case, please?
It's effectively it's to join up with the rest of the aspiration for the bus lane system into Canterbury. It's all on the southbound side. Some of it has been delivered, some of it has been attempted, but not come forward very well. So, but the southbound was the aspiration to bring all the way in. On your way out, the traffic flows should be an awful lot easier, and the buses travelling with the traffic should be in a position where they can move away very quickly. So,
can I just clarify then? So the bus northbound would go through Surrey Station, through the level crossing, or will it share the roadway with the cars over the viaduct?
The bus companies are looking at splitting their bus services, so some will go across the new level crossing, and I can't remember exactly how it was going to be operated now. Effectively, half will go across the new viaduct and half will go through the village, because obviously there's a new community that will be created in the Surrey development itself that will need serving by buses as well as maintaining the existing. So we can share what the routings would be and deal with that a little bit more closely. But I think that it was a few years ago when we went through planning process that we were talking to the bus companies. They may have slightly different view on where they're going now with current priorities on buses, whether they're providing more routes or not, I don't know. So we'd need to pick that one up again with them. But they were certainly planning on splitting their services such that both the new community was served as well as the existing community in Surrey.
Thank you. Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Chair. As Mr. Shelton was unable to answer my worries about the cycle routes, I wondered whether he will be consulting with cycling groups such as Spokes and others perhaps to verify that the arrangements in the design are actually going to work for cyclists, because I wouldn't want to see a repetition of what the sort of debacle at Longport, where must have spent a huge amount of money putting in a cycle route which no cyclists seem to use. So it would be a shame to put in all these cycle routes and find that cyclists aren't using them because they're not workable. Thank you.
Yeah, my concern is, being a cyclist, the experienced cyclist will try and use the road. your nervous cyclists will use the facilities that are provided. There are going to be new residential areas. There's access to the school. It's the route into to Canterbury. It would join up with the existing cycle route. So the cycle route itself exists, and there is a continuous cycle route that goes from the A28 across the viaduct and through the development. So cycle facility and cycle routes are there. Whether they're of the quality of that you'd get in Holland, the answer is no, because we don't have the space and the design standards to meet the Holland.
I'm not saying it needs more space. It's just that the layout, I don't understand how they would work, for example. That's all. So I think it does need to be looked at by someone like Spokes, just to check whether they're actually workable.
Well, yeah, we've been through the planning process, and the designs have been validated, not specifically by Spokes, but by our design engineers that have looked at it. And there is a consistent route where you're on the cycle route. The cycle routes are continuous. There are places where you go from the cycleway to the cycle route on the A28, but it is a consistent route through, and there's not gaps within it. We can have another look at some of the detail of it, but most of the detailed interaction between the cyclists and the traffic is in the part of the development that is being delivered by the developer, and it is covered under the Surrey Development Planning.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, again, you can access all of the decisions from planning committees on those. Have a look at the cycle routes as they were discussed during those decisions. And perhaps when we've got some more idea of how things are progressing, you might want to come back again if tonight hasn't been too horrible an experience for you. Thank you very much, Richard. That's a wonderful report. We shall move on to item 11, which is the Highway Works Programme. We do not have an officer to present that. I will do those present the honour of assuming that they have read that in detail. Are there any specific issues that you would like to raise in this forum, or would you like to take those away and speak to the individual officers if there are? In which case, in fact, actually, we haven't noted the Surrey Bypass Resort. Could we note the report from Richard there? Thank you. Excellent. Now, in which case, if there are no outstanding issues on the Highway Works Programme report, are we happy to note that? Oh, we have Councillor Stockley.
One minor thing, probably. However, Osborne Gardens and Terminus Drive are not in Herne. They are in Beltinge. Thank you.
I think Lauren will feed back and ensure that that is amended in the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Stockley. That notwithstanding, are we happy to note the report? Duly noted. Wonderful. By the same token, the monitoring of previous decisions, we do not have an officer present, and there isn't anything hugely controversial as far as I can see, unless I do stand to be corrected. No? In which case, are we happy to note that report by general assent? So noted. Which leads us on to the date of the next meeting, which is 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of March. I note that shortly after all of those February decisions that we've heard about, so we'll have to have a look with the agenda setting as to what happens then. Is there any other urgent business to be dealt with in public?
Chair, there's not, but could I just suggest very quickly that given that we're waiting for various announcements from national government about different strategies that are involving the very area we look at, if something dramatic did happen, it could be considered to have a meeting before that date, because it could be useful. I mean, we don't know the unknowns, but I think the world is moving in our direction.
I think that's a good idea. We talked in the past about having sort of convening special JTBs, and I think that's a good idea. If we do get some seismic news in the next few months, you never know. Wonderful. If there's no urgent business... Oh!
I should have come in a bit earlier.
You Ms Dawkins or Councillor Dawkins tonight?
Councillor Dawkins is fine.
Okay.
I should have said earlier, sorry, but on the next agenda, would it be possible to have an update on the Winteep Dietary and Slip Road? please.
We didn't have the windsheet gyratory on this agenda because there wasn't much to update on. It is discussed in all of the agenda settings as almost like a standing item. So yeah, if there is something to update, then that will definitely be at the next agenda, and let's hope there is by that point. Yeah. Anybody else with anything they'd like to see on the next agenda? Happy to take that outside of this meeting, obviously, as will Dan, I'm sure. We have nothing to be discussed without the press or public present. In which case, I declare this meeting closed. Thank you very